Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. India's moment is finally here. The G20 summit is underway. Just some time back, US President Joe Biden landed in New Delhi. He's meeting India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi at his residence. Earlier, Prime Minister Modi met the leaders of Bangladesh and Mauritius. He has more than 15 bilaterals planned this weekend. This is above and beyond the sessions that he would chair as the G20 host. The summit is the climax of the meetings that India held this year. All the work that has gone into the G20 over the past few months. This is the climax of that. And while this is a great opportunity to showcase India and its leadership, the challenges are real. The divide between the West and the East is growing. Can New Delhi bridge these differences? We'll be tracking the events through the weekend. Meanwhile, in other news, the US wants to build a rail line in West Asia with India's help. China's crackdown on the iPhone has led to a $200 billion loss for Apple, and the age-old debate of Messi versus Ronaldo has finally been put to rest. Ronaldo declares that the rivalry is over. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. China flexes its muscle again in the disputed South China Sea. The Philippines says Chinese vessels interfered with its mission to a military outpost. Beijing claims almost the entire waterway. Trillions of dollars of trade passes through the disputed South China Sea every year. Clashes resume between rival factions in Lebanon's largest Palestinian refugee camp. More than 20 people have been injured. Ain al-Helway is home to more than 60,000 refugees. It was created for Palestinians who fled during the 1948 Arab-Israeli war. A disgraced Turkish crypto founder has been sentenced to over 11,000 years in jail. You heard that right, 11,000 years in jail. Todex chief Faruk Ozer was found guilty of money laundering and fraud. He fled to Albania in 2021. In June, Ozer was extradited to Turkey. Hong Kong flooded by its heaviest rainfall in 140 years. Schools closed, stock exchange cancels all trading. The city's streets and few subway stations are underwater. More than 100 injured as authorities issue flash flood warnings. And Jimmy Fallon says sorry to his Tonight Show staff. The apology comes after claims that he created a toxic workplace. Former and current employees said that the talk show host had frequent outbursts on the set. The leaders are arriving, the meetings have begun. India is hosting the G20 summit and we are bringing you our 360-degree coverage. Also special editions of Vantage on Saturday and Sunday, 9 p.m. IST, 3:30 p.m. GMT. Our team will be at the venue to capture all the action for you. So whatever it is that you want to know about this G20 summit, this is your destination, Firstpost. Let's start with what happened today. Almost all the key leaders are here, from Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida to UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, US President Joe Biden, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, also her counterpart, European Council President Charles Michel. It's a long list. More than 30 heads of state, top officials from the European Union and 14 heads of international organizations will be in New Delhi by Saturday morning. Most leaders are arriving tonight, and India has gone all out to welcome them. All dignitaries are being welcomed by traditional Indian dancers. The performers represent different states of India. Also, the country's rich diversity, like the Bihu from Assam and the Sambalpuri from Odisha, which the IMF chief also tried to perform. Take a look at this. And she was quite a sport. India has put its rich cultural diversity on display. Some leaders are trying to experience it, like British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. He's reconnecting with his Indian roots, he says. He arrived in India this afternoon and went straight to the British Council to engage with the Indian community. Later, he spoke about his Indian heritage.
Hindu, and that's how I was raised, that's how I am. Hopefully I can visit a mandir while I'm here for the next couple of days. And yes, we've just had Raksha Bandhan, so from my sister and my cousins I have all my Rakis, and you know, I didn't have time to celebrate Janmashtami properly the other day, but hopefully, as I said, I can make up for that if we visit a mandir this time. But it's something that is important to me. I think faith is something that helps everybody who has faith in their lives, particularly when you have these stressful jobs like I do. Having faith to give you resilience, to give you strength is important, and it provides an outlook on life which I find particularly valuable.
It's quite an experience for the dignitaries arriving in New Delhi, but some leaders will miss out on this experience. There are some notable absentees, like the presidents of Russia and China. Xi Jinping has sent the Chinese Premier Li Qiang to lead their delegation. Ahead of their arrival, Beijing issued a statement. It said that China is ready to work with all parties and push for a positive outcome at the G20.
Firstly, China has always attached great importance to the G20 and actively participated in related activities. In preparation for the New Delhi summit, the Chinese delegation also participated in the consultations and discussions on the document in a positive and constructive manner. We are ready to work with all parties to promote a positive outcome.
Well, consensus could be elusive, especially on Ukraine. The Russian president, as you know, is also not coming. In fact, he won't participate in any capacity, not even virtually. He will not make a speech online, as he tends to do when he is not attending a summit. Russia will be represented by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Remember, Putin opted out last year as well. Indonesia was the host then of the G20, and they invited Putin, but it was a no-show. Perhaps because Zelensky was invited too at the summit in Bali. The Ukrainian president delivered a virtual address then. This year, India has not invited Zelensky in any capacity. There's a last-minute pullout as well. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez. He tested positive for the Wuhan virus, so he will not be coming. The Spanish first vice president is attending in his place. There are some special guests as well. India has invited 9 countries. These are not G20 members, but New Delhi wanted them to join the talks. The leaders of Bangladesh, Egypt, Mauritius, the Netherlands, Nigeria, Oman, Singapore, Spain and the UAE. Their leaders are in New Delhi for this event. Heads of international organizations are also here, like the chiefs of the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund and, of course, the United Nations. India has made the developing world a priority. The idea is to amplify their concerns on a global stage. Prime Minister Modi's first engagements reflect that. He held 3 meetings today. He met the leaders of Mauritius and Bangladesh. The third meeting was with US President Joe Biden. We'll cover that in just a bit. Let's talk about the first 2 meetings with Mauritius and Bangladesh. Mauritius is being represented by Pravind Kumar Jagnauth, the Prime Minister, and Bangladesh is being represented by their Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. These were bilateral talks. Prime Minister Modi met both the leaders at his residence. The next 2 days will be hectic for him, to say the least. His schedule is packed. He will chair a range of sessions at the G20. They will cover a wide variety of subjects, from economic growth to sustainable development goals, reform of multilateral institutions, digital public infrastructure, gender equality, a whole host of things. And when he is not inside the summit hall, Prime Minister Modi will be holding bilateral talks. He'll meet the leaders of the United Kingdom, Japan, Germany, Italy, France, Canada, Turkey, the UAE, South Korea and others. More than 15 bilateral meetings have been planned. So what can we expect tomorrow? Saturday is the first business day of the G20 summit. The leaders will gather at Bharat Mandapam. That's the venue of the summit. It's in central Delhi. The leaders, they will discuss the leaders' declaration. India has prepared a draft, and this draft will go through tough scrutiny. The leaders will go over every line and push back wherever they have an objection. We told you about this yesterday. There are divisions over a passage on Ukraine. The West wants a strong condemnation of the war.
We are still negotiating, and I don't intend to say something that will be that will make the efforts more difficult. We support the efforts made by the Indian presidency, but this is very clear that the EU position is crystal clear, and we condemn this Russian aggression. We support the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Ukraine.
Russia and China, of course, are against that. And remember, the G20 is not like the United Nations Security Council. Here, every member gets a veto. So there has to be unanimous support for the declaration for it to pass. Every member has to agree. Can India make that happen? Can India bridge the divide and thrash out a consensus? New Delhi remains hopeful.
New Delhi leaders' declaration is almost ready. I would not like to dwell on it because this declaration will be recommended to the leaders and the leaders will then accept it. And only after it has been accepted by the leaders, we'll be able to talk about the actual achievements of this declaration.
Now, while the G20 has 20 members and all of them have a veto, some members are like the first among equals. They have considerably more influence. They tend to shape the agenda and they could decide the fate of the Delhi Declaration. One of them is Joe Biden. The US President, Joe Biden, he arrived a short while back in New Delhi. His plane Air Force One landed at the Palam Air Force Station. There was a bit of rain in the air, but the president seemed to be in high spirits. He was treated to a traditional Indian dance on the runway. It's been a highlight of India's G20 welcome. Now, with the niceties done, it was time for the main event. Biden headed to Prime Minister Modi's residence. That's where the bilateral meeting is happening. At the Prime Minister's residence, he welcomed Joe Biden to his home. They exchanged some pleasantries, shared a few laughs, and then it was down to business. Later tonight, Prime Minister Modi will also be hosting a private dinner for Joe Biden. Now, this is Biden's first visit to India as the US president. He took charge in January 2021. It's taken him more than 2 years to visit India, but this delay has not affected the relationship. Many would argue that this is the highest point in India-US relations, the highest ever. I will say one thing though, it's pretty late for a bilateral meeting. I guess there's a lot to discuss. Biden and Modi last met in June. The Prime Minister was in Washington for a state visit. He and President Biden announced multiple deals for jet engines, for Predator drones, and for 5G technology. So tonight, it's all about taking stock, seeing how much progress has been made since June. A couple of issues are also on the agenda, like civil nuclear cooperation. India's nuclear power program is not making much progress. The last decade was a missed opportunity. But now with climate change, nuclear power is all the more important. Countries are shifting from fossil fuels to nuclear energy. And many of them see nuclear power as a good alternative. So what's the plan here? Well, the US and India already have a nuclear deal. The idea is to rejuvenate it. Talks are underway to build 6 reactors in India. Biden and Modi could fast-track it. They could clear all the domestic hurdles. Also on the agenda will be Ukraine, China, and the Indo-Pacific. India and the US largely agree on the last 2 issues, China and the Indo-Pacific, but Ukraine will be a tough nut to crack. Washington is the biggest supporter of Kiev. New Delhi, meanwhile, has not criticized Russia's invasion, and this will be a showdown tomorrow. The Western countries want tougher language against Russia, but Moscow says no way. They have threatened to block the joint statement if it is anti-Russia. And stuck in between is India. It is always the host's job to build consensus, and that's where today's meeting between Modi and Biden could be important. The US can influence Western policy. Biden can convince Europe to accept India's joint statement or at least make some concessions. Maybe that explains this late-night bilateral meeting. Biden's national security advisor did promise to play a positive role. Listen to what he said, and I'm quoting, "Our coordinators have been working all day and all night the last few days on the joint statement. We bring a spirit of compromise to a lot of the different issues that are contentious so that we can find a text that everybody can live with." So that is the US position. America's Treasury Secretary was also positive. That's Janet Yellen. She's also in New Delhi right now. Yellen has laid out multiple priorities, like expanding the funds available to the World Bank, tackling climate change, the debt relief for the Global South. She also praised India's G20 presidency in a divided world, and she promised full support to drafting a joint statement. Listen in.
I understand that this is challenging to craft such language, but I know the negotiators are discussing it and working hard to do so, and we stand ready certainly to work with India to try to craft a communique that successfully addresses this concern.
The US too has something to gain. There was a very important BRICS summit last month. The group added 6 new members. It's no secret that China wants to turn BRICS into an anti-US bloc. Now, Biden will try to prevent that, and for that he needs Prime Minister Modi's support. So a lot hinges on the meeting that is happening right now between Modi and Biden, and on the consensus that Modi and Biden can build. Remember, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin are not attending. So there is added pressure on Modi and Biden. They are leaders of the 2 largest democracies in the world, also 2 of the biggest economies in the world. So the decisions being made now could determine the G20 outcome tomorrow. And they have a lot to talk about. One of the issues that they could discuss is a rail deal, a railway project connecting West Asia. And this is a very important deal. Tonight we'll tell you what this is about. It's basically a major joint infrastructure deal. It will connect West Asia via a network of railways. The US president is lobbying for it. So are the leaders of India, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So clearly there's a lot of push, a lot of powers want it. But where does India feature in this? Well, this network will also connect to India. This will be via shipping lanes from ports in the region. Now, this railway project apparently is a key deliverable for Joe Biden. The US president wants to secure this deal. And reports suggest that he wants to do this during the G20 weekend, meaning in the next 2 days, he wants this railway deal. So you could expect an announcement in the next 2 days. And we'll wait for that. But let's look at what the deal is all about. The idea first came up during I2U2 talks. I2U2 is a grouping that includes Israel, the US, India and the UAE, I2U2. Many call it the West Asian Quad. It was established in 2021. The group primarily focuses on infrastructure projects in West Asia. Israel first came up with this idea. This was during the talks they held last year. It wanted to connect the region through railways. Part of the idea was using Indian expertise, tapping India's knowledge for this infrastructure project. The Biden administration then expanded on the idea. They wanted to bring Saudi Arabia too, which brings us to this railway deal, the one that we have today. When you look at West Asia, on one side there's the Levant, the region along the eastern Mediterranean. It includes countries like Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Iraq and Jordan. Then there are the Gulf nations, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. This project is expected to connect Arab nations in the Levant to those in the Gulf. How do you do that? By a railway network. And this network will then connect to India. This will be via seaports in the Gulf. The first reports about this project started coming in the month of May. That's when US National Security Advisor jetted off to Saudi Arabia. He met with his Saudi, Emirati and Indian counterparts. And we are currently in the month of September and it looks like it could be a done deal soon. So why is this project so important? Why does it matter? The United States obviously has its own objectives. No one said it out loud, but this project was about China from day one. Beijing's influence is growing in West Asia. We saw China broker peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It is also attempting to wade into the Israel-Palestine conflict. The Chinese are trying to enter there. Clearly, that's not going down too well with Washington. Plus, West Asia is a key part of China's Belt and Road vision. China has been developing major infrastructure projects across the region. So the I2U2 forum and now this potential joint rail project is part of the American response. It could also lead to a Saudi-Israeli normalization. If Israel and Saudi Arabia do end up normalizing ties in the future, Tel Aviv could be a part of the railway deal. It would help broaden the project's reach to Europe. But what's in it for India? Well, a lot of things. First of all, West Asia is crucial for India's energy security. So this project will allow for faster movement of crude. It will also help minimize costs in the long run. 2, it will help boost trade. This is a project that will connect the whole of West Asia and there will be Indian stakes. So it will open up a lot of opportunities. 3, India's infrastructure skills and knowledge will be on display. India will help in building this project, and this in turn will help New Delhi build a brand. And 4, it will help Indian citizens in the Gulf. Nearly 8 million Indians live and work there. The connectivity boost is a good thing for them. So basically, it's a win-win for all. The deal is expected to be announced soon, maybe on the sidelines of the G20 summit. We will keep track for you. And here's what else we can expect this weekend. The last G20 summit. No, this is not going away, but soon it may have more than 20 members, so it will not be G20 anymore. G20 is a group of 20. They're getting a new member. Who is this new member? It's actually a group of 55 new members. We're talking about the African Union. It's a group of 55 countries. India wanted them to join the G20. The African Union is presently chaired by the president of Comoros, Azali Assoumani. He's already in India for the G20 summit. He arrived today. Now, you may have a few questions. If the African Union is not a member yet, why do they have a representative here? Why should the AU get a G20 membership? And why is India championing this cause? We'll start with the first question. The African Union is not a member, but it's a permanent guest of the G20. In fact, the G20 has a lot of permanent guests, like the United Nations, ASEAN, the IMF, the World Bank, even Spain. Overall, there are 12 permanent guests. The African Union is one of them, so their representative is always present at the G20 summit, which brings us to the next question. If the African Union is already present at every G20 summit, why do they need a full membership? Well, it's about just representation. Think about Africa. Africa is home to 1.4 billion people, about 17% of the world's population. But the continent has just one full member in the G20, and that is South Africa. That's all, one member. This lack of representation appears even more stark when you compare Africa to Europe. Europe's population is about 750 million people, a bit more than half of Africa's. But Europe has 5 G20 member countries: Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Russia. There's also Turkey, which, like Russia, is part of both Asia and Europe, but for now we're not counting it. So we'll say that there are 5 European G20 members. Then there's the European Union itself. It has 27 member countries, and they get a voice at the table because the European Union is a G20 member. So 5 countries plus the EU, which means France, Germany, Italy get a little extra say. They're members via the EU, and they're members in their own capacity. But that's not where the European tilt ends. You also have Spain as a permanent guest. It is the only country to have that status, a permanent guest country. When you consider all of this, you can see that Europe has a lot of say in the G20, greater than its population should warrant. And conversely, Africa does not have enough of a voice. Now, the AU joining the G20, the African Union joining the G20 as a full member, will not completely undo this disparity, but it is a start. 2 voices at the table are better than 1. And it's a way towards just representation. That's one of the reasons why India is pushing for the full inclusion of the African Union.
As far as AU is concerned, let me say that the Prime Minister, who's a great believer in Global South, had written to all the leaders and there has been a very positive response, but formally that will come before the summit.
That was Amitabh Kant, India's G20 Sherpa. He basically said that this was a move by India to further the cause of the Global South. It's India's way of bringing more voices to the table, especially voices from the Global South that have so much in common with India. It will likely give India more allies at future summits. So it's not just an egalitarian move, it's also a smart political move on India's part, which is why India is championing the inclusion of the African Union. And it seems the rest of the G20 is listening to New Delhi.
I look forward to welcoming the African Union as a permanent member of the G20, and I am proud that the EU reacted immediately in a positive way to support this candidature.
Charles Mitchell says the EU is on board. He says the EU responded to the suggestion immediately and in a positive way. India has other leaders. India says, in fact, that other leaders have responded in much the same way. They're also positive. So all that's left are the formalities, unless, of course, someone vetoes the process. Now, on the face of it, there's no reason for anyone to stop the African Union from joining the G20. It should be a done deal. But there's something to be said about not counting your chickens before they hatch. We've explained why this needs to be done. The decision should come by Sunday, so we are hoping to bring you the good news soon. Meanwhile, earlier today, I spoke to the Foreign Minister of Nigeria. His name is Yusuf Maitama Tugar. And this is what he said about India hosting the G20 summit and pushing for the inclusion of the African Union. Welcome to Firstpost, sir.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
Good, a bit tired, but feeling good.
The Nigerian delegation was the first to arrive for the G20 summit. How's your experience of New Delhi in particular and India in general been so far?
It's been wonderful. We received a warm welcome. I was the first foreign minister to arrive. My president was the first president to arrive, even though we arrived separately. So it's been wonderful.
You've liked it so far?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, this year's G20 summit, there's a lot of buzz about Africa. We understand the African Union is going to be made a part of the group, and India has been pushing for it. Do you foresee any obstacles, or how optimistic are you about this happening?
Very optimistic. We welcome the idea, but we also feel that Nigeria should be included as well, being the most populous country in Africa and the largest economy. And, you know, the theme is one world, one family, one future. We want that future to be democratic, and the family should be democratized and more inclusive. So 15% of Africans should be included. The same way that EU and other European countries are included, we feel that there's room for the AU and Nigeria at the same time.
And what sort of response has this proposal received so far?
Well, there's still talks going on. Quite a number of countries are not averse to that idea. I believe India is also one of them, because India has always been supportive of the global South and South-South cooperation and collaboration. We've been partners going back to you know, the non-aligned movement, the struggle to free Africa from racist colonial rule. So, you know, we're quite optimistic. We're happy that India saw it fit to invite us.
How do you see India's role here as the G20 chair, but in particular, the Prime Minister has been talking about the inclusion of Africa and the inclusion of African partners. How do you see that effort?
No, this is wonderful. It's welcome, and we're happy and lucky that India has the presidency, even though it's just for a year. But India is a very key member of the G20, and we believe with the support of countries like India and the forward outlook of Prime Minister Modi, we can get in there. And we need to be on the decision-making table of the largest economies in the world, where, you know, key decisions that affect the whole world and that affect Africa are there. We're just coming out of a pandemic. We saw what happened with you know, the whole politics surrounding vaccines, and how some countries were shortchanged, and what some are referring to even as vaccine apartheid. So this is why it's very key for Nigeria, which is expected to become the third largest country in the world with a population of 400 million, to be part of the G20.
You mentioned some very important issues, and you know, post the pandemic and then the war in Ukraine, we've seen this East-West divide sort of widen. And this is a very important platform where leaders like you and others who represent the global South can make their voice heard and raise the issues that really matter to the people. Having said that, there is a feeling that the war in Ukraine and the politics surrounding it may overshadow all the conversations over the next few days. Is that a fear that you share?
I don't share that, because, you know, countries like India, for instance, India is the largest country on the planet, you know. Nigeria is the largest country on the African continent. So even though we're not members, we're invitees, we're attending, and I think there's more to discuss than just Ukraine. Yes, it's important to discuss Ukraine. Yes, it's important, you know, to talk about how to stop conflicts the whole field of international relations was founded on the effort to try and stop wars, stop conflicts. But there's a whole lot more to discuss beyond Ukraine.
Do you think the absence of some prominent names also impacts the kind of conversations that will happen? The United States, for instance, has called Beijing a spoiler. That's the word they used.
Yes, well, I mean, these are, like I said, the theme is one world, one family, one future. So even within families, siblings quarrel, they fight. And I'm sure, some of these issues will be resolved, and this is perhaps one time that not all members of the family will be in attendance, but the next presidency moves to Brazil. Maybe by then some of these issues would have been resolved, or there's common ground to meet all together, and hopefully for Nigeria to be part of such future meetings.
So that's the G20 story, the story of what's possible with cooperation. But lately, that's been missing, cooperation. The G20 has become more about bickering than cooperating. Just look at the top two economies of the world, China and the United States. Both countries are busy sanctioning each other. It's hurting their economy, it's hurting their people, it's also hurting their big corporations like Apple. Reports say China is cracking down on iPhones. First, they asked central government employees to not use Apple iPhones. Why is that? Well, in typical Chinese style, no reason was given. Just listen and follow. But new reports say that the ban is being widened now. More employees have been asked to not use Apple iPhones, like those working at state-owned companies and those working in agencies linked to the government. Now, that's a lot of people. China has more than 150,000 state-owned enterprises. Put together, they employ millions of people. Imagine all of them shifting away from the iPhone. What would happen? Apple would lose a lot of customers. Their share prices have already fallen. They've fallen by almost 6% in 2 days. Almost $200 billion has been wiped out. $200 billion in 2 days tells you how big the Chinese market is for them. Apple does not release country-wise data for their sales, but most analysts quote the same number. They say China makes up around 19% of Apple sales. 19% of their market, almost a fifth. Any disruption in that market promises to be a problem. So what is China playing at? Well, in public, they're saying the same things, that foreign companies are still welcome in China. Listen to this.
China has always been determined to promote a high level of opening up to the outside world. Products and services from any country are welcome to enter the Chinese market as long as they comply with and meet the requirements of Chinese laws and regulations.
But clearly that's not the case, because this move goes beyond just the partial ban. It's about sending a message, a tit-for-tat message. In 2019, the US targeted China's flagship company, Huawei. It was sort of blacklisted. Washington told American companies, do not supply to Huawei if you must take permission from us. And this decision hampered Huawei's growth. It lost out on revenue worth $12 billion. So now China is taking revenge. What the US did to Huawei, China is trying to do to Apple. The timing is certainly suspect. Just last week, Huawei unveiled a new phone, the Mate 60 Pro. It's sort of like a sanction buster. I'll tell you why. The US has restricted Huawei's access to chips. This was done in 2019. Chip access was restricted 4 years back. So what did the company do? They built their own. And by the looks of it, it's a good one. Early tests show the Mate 60 Pro is faster than most 5G phones. So China could be hitting two birds with one stone. A, it's a blow to Apple, and B, it's a boost to Huawei. Analysts say Apple's China sales could dip by 5%. If that happens, there will be a gap in the market, and a gap that someone must fill. Someone with a shiny new phone that has a homemade chip. We'll talk about Huawei in a bit, but first, let's focus on Apple. What will be the long-term effect of these curbs? Could they actually hurt Apple? Well, the headline is not encouraging. Apple prides itself on privacy. In fact, it's one of the major selling points of Apple, their USP. that they ensure your privacy. So the ban on government employees is a bit unsettling. It will trigger rumors of snooping. Having said that, Apple is not Huawei. Just look at the difference in size. Huawei is worth around $160 billion and Apple, $2.8 trillion. It's a case of being too big to fall. Plus, Apple has some leverage over China. The company has invested $275 billion in the country since 2016. Apple has invested $275 billion in China. It has also created more than 5 million jobs. So Apple has some levers too. They're already shifting supply chains out of China. Such bans could speed up that process. As for Huawei, there is no time like now. Their new phone is the talk of the town. It has completely surprised American officials. Many of them are asking if the sanctions were not strong enough. Listen to the U.S. National Security Advisor.
That the United States should continue on its course of a small yard, high fence set of technology restrictions focused narrowly on national security concerns, not on the broader question of commercial decoupling. That is where our emphasis has been. That's where it's going to continue, sort of regardless of the outcome.
That was on Tuesday. The latest update is this. America has started investigating Huawei's new chip. They want to figure out how Huawei made it. Did they sidestep American sanctions or did they use their own skills and knowledge? Well, either way, one thing is clear, the sanctions war is not ending soon. In fact, it's just getting started. You could see more and more companies getting caught in the crossfire. And speaking of crossfire, India too has some worries, similar worries, not with iPhones, but with China's plans for Taiwan. PLA's activities have sparked fresh concerns. The risk of an invasion is growing. New Delhi has started assessing this emerging threat in Taiwan. A report came out today. It says India's Chief of Defence Staff has commissioned a study. His name is General Anil Chauhan, and he has asked for a study to look into the threat of an invasion of Taiwan and the impact of a war on the wider region. The study will also assess different war scenarios and India's options if China decides to invade. So why is New Delhi focusing on Taiwan? Because of the United States. Apparently, the US has made some discreet inquiries. American officials want to know what India's response would be if China invades Taiwan. Will India be open to providing support? As far as we know, New Delhi has made no such commitment. But they do think that the situation is serious enough to merit a closer look, which is why the military has ordered a study. How soon will this report be ready? We don't know that yet, but we understand they want it as soon as possible. What kind of possibilities are they considering? If China invades Taiwan, what options does India have? Well, when it comes to military planning, one option is never good enough. Strategists look at a range of options, and each is calibrated to the severity of the situation. And India's position is no different. It could respond in a variety of ways. One option is logistical support. That could mean supporting Western warships, providing repair and maintenance facilities, also food, fuel and medical support. Another possibility is blocking sea routes. In the past, we've discussed the Malacca Strait. This is a major shipping channel. It's a vital transit point for Chinese ships. They use this route frequently, especially to move energy supplies. Now, China is one of the world's largest oil importers. In 2016, most of China's oil came through Malacca. How much? Almost 80%. And India is in a good situation to strike these ships. There are various vantage points nearby for India, including a military base in the Andamans. But will New Delhi make such an intervention? Indian officials have not said anything, neither has Washington, but China is not ignoring this report.
Taiwan is a part of China, and the Taiwan issue is China's internal affair. Solving the Taiwan issue is a matter for the Chinese people themselves and brooks no external interference. It is very dangerous for the US to hype up the Taiwan issue on various occasions, create tension, provoke confrontation, and promote the internationalization of the Taiwan issue. The most effective way to maintain peace and stability in the Taiwan Straits is for people to abide by the One China principle and oppose Taiwan's independence in a clear and unequivocal manner.
So this is the statement that came from Beijing today. New Delhi's actions have touched a raw nerve there. This response is on expected lines. Taiwan is a sensitive issue for China, and India has been taking interest. Last month, Taipei welcomed some Indian visitors. 3 former Indian service chiefs. They said that they were on a private visit, but Beijing did not see it that way. These photographs made quite a stir in Beijing. Chinese military observers took note. Even China's foreign ministry spoke about it. They issued a statement. I have it with me. This is what they said. China firmly opposes all forms of professional interaction between Taiwan authorities and countries having diplomatic relations with China. The fact is, China has never respected the territorial integrity of other countries, including India. It is building infrastructure in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. It is trying to violate India's border in the Himalayas, but it wants India to not engage with Taiwan. Despite China's threats, New Delhi's posture is changing. Taiwan is now firmly a part of India's strategic calculus. North Korea has finally done it. It claims to have launched a tactical nuclear attack submarine, something that's long been on its weapons wish list. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un held a ceremony to reveal this submarine. He said it will be one of the Navy's main means of underwater offensive. That's the term he used. Pyongyang is calling this the beginning of a new chapter. But not everyone is happy. North Korea's neighbors are feeling uneasy, and experts are not shipping the sub either. They say Pyongyang's claim should be taken with a large pinch of salt. Our next report tells you why.
Quite the festive occasion, isn't it? Colourful balloons and confetti engulf the scene. Hundreds of people wave flowers and flags. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is seen with a smile plastered on his face as he stands in a shipyard surrounded by naval officers. But all of this is overshadowed by one thing, an enormous black submarine. It's the toast of the town, and this celebration is in fact in its honor. North Korea held a ceremony to reveal the submarine, which Pyongyang claims can launch nuclear weapons. They say it's a tactical nuclear attack submarine. It has been named Hero Kim Kun-ok after a North Korean naval officer and a historical figure. And Pyongyang is quite proud of it. It has regularly tested ballistic and cruise missiles this year. But a nuclear attack submarine has long been on the country's weaponry wish list. The regime has been working to develop one for years now. And why is that? Because submarines are difficult to locate underwater. Having one will allow North Korea to attack its enemies from the sea. Which is probably why Kim said the sub will be one of the Navy's main means of underwater offensive. He's already assigned it to a fleet. The lucky winner patrols the waters between the Korean peninsula and Japan. So obviously Pyongyang's neighbors aren't too happy. Japan says that North Korea poses a grave danger to its security. South Korea has also condemned the launch, but they aren't too worried. They doubt the vessel even works properly, and experts agree. They say Pyongyang's claims should be taken with a large pinch of salt. The skepticism comes with good reason. Analysts say this new sub belongs to the Romeo class. That's a Soviet-era class of submarines. Meaning it's obsolete by modern standards. It's probably been modified to carry nuclear weapons. Reports say the submarine will be noisy and slow. It will also have limited range. On top of that, no one is certain that the sub is operational. Pyongyang has yet to demonstrate it successfully. While the success of this newly launched sub is unclear, one thing isn't. Kim wants to send a message to the world.
Based on the valuable experience and technology gained from the construction of submarine number 841, we will have to rapidly pursue the process of converting all medium-sized submarines into attack types in order to turn those existing submarines into nuclear submarines at once.
Kim is trying to build a stronger nuclear-powered navy.
Let me assure that in the next 5 or 10 years, we will have to create an era in which our navy forces evolve so that we can meet the absolute mission that other military sectors can never replace.
But these subs may not add much value to the country's defense system. By the looks of it, the aging submarines won't survive long during a war, so it could just be optics. While it may look threatening, the bark might be worse than the bite.
Another day, another strange Elon Musk headline. This one claims he prevented a nuclear war. Elon Musk prevented a nuclear war. I must say, even for Elon Musk, this is an outlandish claim. So what exactly is the story here? A new Musk biography is about to be released. It talks about his involvement in Ukraine. When the war began, Musk was in Kiev's corner. In fact, he kept the country online. Russia had knocked out Ukraine's internet connectivity, so Elon Musk sent his Starlink satellite terminals. We're talking about multi-million-dollar shipments, but later on, Musk lost interest. His support for Ukraine became lukewarm, which brings us to the incident in question. We don't know when it happened, but this is how the upcoming biography narrates it. Ukraine was plotting an attack on Russian ships in Crimea. Their plan was to use submarine drones. These drones are the ones that travel underwater, hence submarine drones. And they never hit the target. Instead, they washed up on the Crimean shore. So what happened there? The book claims that Elon Musk intervened. He secretly asked his engineers to disable Starlink near Crimea. No internet, no drones. Basically, the book says Elon Musk sabotaged Ukraine's attack. And why did he do that? Apparently, Musk spoke to Russia's ambassador in the United States. He told him of the drone attack. The Russian envoy said there would be a nuclear response to this. So Elon Musk got spooked. He disconnected Starlink satellites. The book says Ukraine asked him to restore the connections, but Musk refused. He said the drone attack would lead to an escalation. Now remember, this is what the book says. Let me also tell you Elon Musk's version. No book business here. This is straight from his Twitter account. This is what he says. The Starlink regions in question were not activated, so SpaceX did not deactivate anything. There was an emergency request from government authorities to activate Starlink all the way to Sevastopol. The obvious intent being to sink most of the Russian fleet at anchor. If I had agreed to their request, then SpaceX would be explicitly complicit in a major act of war and conflict escalation. Let me break that down for you. This is what Elon Musk has said. He basically is making two arguments. One, the satellites were never online, so there was no question of them turning them off. And two, he did not want an escalation. He wanted to keep his company out of this war. Too late, I would say. We don't know which of these versions is true, but either way, a showdown is underway. Ukraine is pinning the blame on Elon Musk. They say his decision led to the death of civilians and children. Russia, on the other hand, is thrilled. This is what their former president, Dmitry Medvedev, is saying. Looks like Musk is the last adequate mind in North America. God help us if he is. But anyway, our story is not about Elon Musk. It's about this worrying trend. How can one company dictate the outcome or the course of a war? Or in this case, the outcome of one operation? It is too much power for a company. For any company. Just think about it. If Elon Musk wants to, he can unplug Ukraine from the internet. He can cripple their defenses. And he can do that with zero accountability. Consider this Crimea incident. Elon Musk spoke to the White House about it. He also informed the chairman of Joint Chiefs. So the US government knew about what he was doing. They knew he either sabotaged or did not help Ukraine. And what consequence did he face? Well, nothing. Tells you how powerful big tech is. These companies have a monopoly on strategic technology like social media. Let me take you back to the year 2011. NATO was waging a war in Libya to depose Muammar Gaddafi. The alliance did not have eyes beyond enemy lines. So what did they do? They took information from Twitter. And this information was used to pick targets for drone strikes. Again, imagine the power. It makes you wonder what comes next. I know we keep talking about countries becoming superpowers, but many people say the next superpower will not be a country. It will be companies like SpaceX. And looking at their power, how can we disagree? They may not dominate geopolitics, but they can certainly influence it. Just imagine this. What if the attack on Crimea actually happened? Would Russia have responded with a nuclear attack? Thanks to Elon Musk, we will never know. But that's no reason to cheer and celebrate him as the man who prevented a nuclear war, because the fact is, he should not have that power in the first place. For our last story tonight, we'll talk about the end of an era. An end to one of the greatest sporting rivalries of all time, the battle that lit up the pitches in Europe for over a decade, Messi versus Ronaldo. For over 20 years, these two have dominated football, and each has built a legion of fans from around the world, fans who were as bitter rivals as the legends they worshipped. But all that seems to be ending. Cristiano Ronaldo has confirmed it. Yesterday, he told the press that the rivalry was over, and in effect, he said football will never be the same again. Here's a report.
Portuguese legend Cristiano Ronaldo, Argentine ace Lionel Messi. The two of them have dominated football for the better part of 2 decades. From their teens to their late 30s, the two have been at the pinnacle of the sport. And over all these years, they've built a legendary rivalry. The comparisons had been on for years, but the 2009 UEFA Champions League final saw them go head-to-head in one of the biggest stages of world football. Messi emerged victorious. He scored the winning goal in that match. A few months later, he pipped Ronaldo to win his first Ballon d'Or, one of football's greatest honours. Ronaldo had won the coveted award in 2008, and he wanted it back. Ronaldo decided to fight Messi on his own turf. He made a world record move to Real Madrid ahead of the 2009-10 season. And that's when the rivalry truly reached epic proportions. Messi was the talisman for Barcelona. Ronaldo was the linchpin for Real Madrid. The two were facing off against each other during one of football's greatest derbies, the El Clásico. There was no looking back. Between 2008 and 2017, either Messi or Ronaldo won the Ballon d'Or. They won 5 each in those 10 years. And their clubs usually went on to lift a host of other trophies as well. For those 10 years, the Messi-Ronaldo rivalry had no parallels. But things started to cool down after that. In 2018, Ronaldo left Spain. The Portuguese star went on to Italian champions Juventus. Then, in 2021, he returned to Manchester United, where he stayed till last November. Then this year, Cristiano left Europe. He joined the Saudi Arabian club Al Nassr. Lionel Messi followed suit soon after. A few months ago, the Argentine forward moved to Miami, Florida, and he currently plays for the Major League Soccer club Inter Miami. After what seems like an eon, both of them are out of Europe. So they're out of the UEFA Champions League as well. The chances of them playing each other again are slim. Which is why Ronaldo's message yesterday just confirmed what every football fan already knew.
I don't see things like that. The rivalry is over. It was a good, healthy rivalry that the spectators liked a lot. Whoever likes Cristiano Ronaldo doesn't have to hate Messi, or vice versa, because they're both very good. They changed the history of football, and they keep on doing it. We are respected throughout the world. That's the most important thing. He makes his way, I make mine, even if we're playing outside Europe. He has done well from what I've seen, and so have I. It's about continuing. The legacy continues. The rivalry, I don't see things like that. I've already said, we shared the stage for 15 years.
Earlier this year, they'd faced each other in a friendly match. It was their 37th game against each other. Messi's team won the match. Ronaldo scored a brace. It brought their head-to-head record to this. They have faced each other 37 times. 9 of those matches ended in draws. In the others, Messi is ahead in games won and assists. But they've scored the same number of goals against each other. It's an astounding feat, and not a bad place to end the rivalry. Unless, of course, they both decide to play one more World Cup. Now that would be the best arena to rekindle this epic rivalry.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Mahendra Singh Dhoni was seen playing golf with Donald Trump. And fans are asking, is this for real? The former Indian cricketer and the former US president were seen enjoying a game of golf in the US. In Bolivia, ostriches are running amok on the streets. You don't want to miss this visual. And in Australia, a baby chimpanzee is reunited with her mother. The chimp was receiving treatment after a snake bite. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1974, US President Richard Nixon was pardoned by his successor, Gerald Ford. This was right after the Watergate scandal that led to Nixon's resignation. The pardon made Nixon immune from arrest. Ford called the pardon an attempt to move the country forward. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We will be broadcasting through this weekend, bringing you all the latest updates from the G20 summit. And do catch the special edition of Vantage this Saturday and Sunday. You don't want to miss it. We'll see you tomorrow. We've crossed 2 million subscribers on YouTube. This is arguably the fastest growing news platform, and we can't thank you enough for fueling this growth. All those of you who join us every day to watch this show and more, thank you. We launched Vantage 7 months ago, and these have been some very rewarding 7 months for us. So from the entire team here, heartfelt gratitude.